Hello, world. What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We are here live at the Build Studio in New York City. Our next guest is a #1 best-selling author, speaker, and life interventionist for people in transition. His latest book, Claim Your Power, guides readers on a 40-day journey to identify and dissolve whatever's holding you back, break free from trauma and victimhood, and transform your life. Oprah herself recently named him one of 100 awakened leaders who are using their voices and talent to elevate humanity. That's Oprah, people. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great Mastin Kipp right here. Do it up. Come on.
What's up, you guys? Hello. How's it going?
I didn't mean to play the O card right out of the gate, but that's just one of those things that if you have it, you got to play it.
It's a lot to live up to. It's a lot of pressure. Okay, seriously.
Sure it is. Mastin, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. Happy to be here. You know, I love that it's World Mental Health Day. We're having a conversation about claim your power and purpose and emotional trauma and stuff like that. So it's good to be here and talking about it, which is awesome.
How do you? Because I saw you've been super busy, man. I was watching you on your Insta story. You were teaching one of your master classes just like a day ago. You were at Sirius earlier today. Now you're here. It's like a whirlwind. How do you hold up to this part of the process, man? Going around.
I love it. This is the fun part, you know, because all the work I do primarily is with people individually, and which is really difficult to work on whatever's coming up for them in the nervous system. But to talk about it and to share it, especially to people who aren't aware of what trauma or purpose is and how to work with it, it's super fun to spread the word because it starts to make sense for people like, oh, that's why I'm stuck. I work with a lot of people who know what to do but aren't doing it. And this explains why a lot of times.
Got it, man. So this Claim Your Power is your second book, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And I was reading a little bit of it, and one of the things that I love about your book, and I think you did a lot of this in your first book as well, but it's you talk about your journey and specifically, overcoming addiction and all of the different bumps in the road along the way, which is what I think a lot of your followers identify with, is the humanity, the human side of your journey. And I was curious, man, did it take time for you to figure out how to be that vulnerable and talk about all those struggles with everybody? Did you have to learn how to do that, or is that something innate to you?
Yes. Yeah, no, growing up, I was definitely more avoidant, just kind of keep everything inside. And I had a therapy session, early sobriety, and my therapist said, when you tell on yourself, you're off the hook. Because I was so worried about people finding stuff out about me, whatever my addiction past was. And she said, when you tell yourself, you're off the hook, and then nobody can, like, blackmail you. And so at that point, I was like that, and it felt really good to share the story. And so I started to realize and create more safety around my story and started to realize that was actually more impactful than explaining concepts to people, because you can mentalize things all day long, but human beings learn best through story, you know? And I think a lot of times in personal development, we look at people and we think, oh my God, they're perfect. And that's just not the case. You know, supermodels aren't photoshopped in real life, and personal development people mess up all the time. So, you know, I think that's just how people learn best, and it's true. Because I used to be a manager in Hollywood, and all the celebrities behind the scenes are just, if not more, messed up than you think, you know? And when you go into the world that I'm in and teach what I teach, we teach what we need to learn. So whatever someone's teaching is stuff that they've had to go through themselves. So it would be, I feel like out of integrity to pretend like I wasn't something I'm not, you know?
Well, there's also, too, there is a comfort in knowing that the wisdom comes from experience. It's not that, yes, there's a lot of stuff you've read. Yes, there's a lot of research you've done, but there's a little bit of trust. It's easier for me to listen knowing, this dude's lived it. He knows what he's talking about. He's been down this road before.
I get a lot of pushback around my work with some mental health practitioners because I don't have any license. I'm not a PhD, a PsyD, an LMFT, or any. I have no letters after my name except for NMD, which is not a medical doctor.
Right.
College dropout. I left college to pursue a dream job, but I have a lot of ontological experience, which is like I lived it. My mom was a patient advocate for her from the womb, essentially, because she had chronic pain and was bedridden, and the doctors were not taking care of her. So I've had this in my blood from the beginning, and I'm very upfront about that with people. But it's interesting because I work with a lot of practitioners who are worried, like, I don't have the credentials or whatever, but no one's ever worried about my credentials because I think we live in a world today that people want results. And it's not like I'm performing open heart surgery on people. This is not like some type of specialty like that. But I think the key in any type of coaching or therapeutic relationship is safety between you and the practitioner. And that's something that I've been practicing my entire life. So when people say, what qualifies you to do your work? The answer is client consent and the ability to create safety. And that's kind of think where the world is moving towards, because there's way more people that need help than licensed professionals right now.
Does it ever blow your mind when you think back to sort of like the beginning of this journey for you, and then like you compare and contrast to where you are today and what you're doing? But like I was reading, I think it was 2005-ish, right? And it all started. You were sharing posts and ideas through MySpace and Facebook
Oh
and stuff like
man,
that.
MySpace,
Emails.
yeah.
I know that's
That's
how you
dating.
date.
That's
How
like,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
A while ago.
Yeah.
We're doing it by candlelight to MySpace.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
That's how far
Yeah.
back it was, man.
Yeah, back when you had to walk uphill both ways to school in MySpace days.
What was the impetus in those early days? What were you searching for? What were you trying to achieve back then when you were just sharing posts with friends?
Well, I came out to Hollywood, Los Angeles, and I got into the music business as a manager very early, like 19. And by 22, 23, I was like spun out, just coked out, like just lots of drugs and alcohol and everything you imagine. And I just found myself asking the question, how did this happen? Like, I'm a good kid. Like, what happened here? And I just started looking for answers. And the deeper I went, there was more questions. And I got a lot of value from all that I was learning. And then I decided on MySpace, I'll just start sharing it. And next thing I know, I was like, wasn't just the music manager guy, I was the quote guy in Hollywood, you know, and I'd be like at some like cool hipster party where like Peaches is playing, and they're like, "Oh, Peaches is cool, but dude, that quote you shared was like really cool," you know, or whatever. And it was a weird world because I was throwing parties with like Steve Aoki, who's huge. Like to see what happened with Steve these days is crazy. But meanwhile, like working on my sobriety and working on personal development, and at some point just realized like, wow, in the music business, I'm kind of doing the same thing because a manager in the music business is essentially a coach, essentially, except for I don't have to have just one client, and if they have a bad year emotionally, my finances aren't tied to that. So I decided, why don't I try coaching? And I fell in love with it. And then I didn't mean to get into the trauma conversation, but I started asking why when clients wouldn't get their goals done and they wouldn't follow through on something. And what I started to realize is that everyone has stuff they've been through that's been painful, that's informed them into how they view the world. And people don't have limiting beliefs, but they are trying to keep themselves safe. And that was fascinating to me that, like, why haven't we solved this problem yet? And so now it's a problem that I want to solve. And my goal is to end emotional trauma in our lifetime so that we can kind of move on from a lot of the problems we're having today. But I didn't intend for that to happen. I was just frustrated that someone's like, I want to lose 10 pounds, and then they wouldn't do it. And I would say, why? And it always correlates back to some type of thing that happened in the past.
And this, you talked about this in your TEDx talk as well, just sort of the origin of that, of like as a child asking why. And were you that way as a kid as well?
Oh,
yeah. You were the why kid, even
my
at the early
parents
age?
cursed themselves. They set this up. Sorry, guys. Still this is their fault. Not a lot of stuff is their fault, but this is their fault. They told me always find a way to yes. Right. And so that started with getting yes to them when they wanted to say no, which is why they cursed themselves. But my father and mother were both scientists and always very curious. So I was always trying to get to yes, but always ask why. And they never told me not to ask why. And it's interesting, when you ask why about 5 or 6 times, you can get down to pretty much a root cause of things.
Yeah.
So the TED Talk was how emotional trauma is the root cause of a lot of the social problems we're having today. But it's pretty much the problem. And it's the problem that we haven't discussed or addressed yet because it's very misunderstood.
Right.
What actual trauma is. It's just a disconnection from safety. So if you're not feeling safe, that's a traumatic experience. And then what happens in our bodies as a result of that long term results in anxiety, depression, can't complete goals, procrastination, perfectionism, you name it. And there's a lot of ways to sort of hack that, which is what I do. But
very, very famously, the whole, like, the watershed moment, the game changer was Kim Kardashian tweeted something from you and was like, "Hey, everybody." And she had, at the time, I think it was like 2 million. Now she's got 62 million followers.
And that was back when Twitter was as relevant as Instagram or TikTok today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very early stages.
Back
but
in the day.
Because of that, one could argue that Twitter was the platform that sort of exposed you to the largest audience and kind of got you out there. But I was reading, I don't know if it was on your site or where it was, but it said specifically that you were reluctant to join Twitter at first, and your friends had to kind of like pester you to do it. And I'm wondering what the reluctance was.
Yeah. I just didn't want another social platform. Like I was like,
you were extended.
I'm good. I got Facebook. I'm good. And MySpace. I don't need another one. Now it's like Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook. All it's like next. And we just embraced it now. But I was very reluctant. And what was amazing about that moment for me specifically was at that exact time in the career, I was couch surfing. I had no money. I didn't know what I was doing. I quit a corporate job. Why am I doing this? My parents and family were like, dude, you need to get a job soon. You run out of money. And when that happened, I woke up one day, it was confirmation. And I think when you take a leap of faith and you want to go start something that's your dream, all kinds of doubts creep in. And when there's confirmations like that, it's really powerful.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about that moment specifically, whenever I get someone who's had the experience of that moment on the stage, I'm always very curious. Because I think everybody today, especially with the myriad of social networks, everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants that moment. They think they want that moment. But I'm curious about the reality of waking up and suddenly such a bright spotlight is being shined on?
Shined, yeah.
Shoned? I
Shown.
don't know. But the point is, there's a bright light in your face, and there wasn't yesterday. And now, like, hundreds of thousands or 10,000 people are suddenly aware of you and your voice and your existence. And I'm always curious about the weight of that moment when you realized all these people were listening. Were you excited because it was confirmation? Or did you suddenly realize, oh no, and now everybody knows what I'm talking about and I have to deliver? What was it like?
I think when it happened with Kim, it was excitement. Yeah. When it happened with Oprah, it was like, oh fuck. Because like when you look at like Oprah Winfrey follows you and you're like, well, now what do I say? Everything better be epic and amazing from now on. And I didn't tweet for like a week because I was so stressed. And then I said, I'm just gonna do what I normally do and just whatever, because that's what I did to get here. So I'm just gonna keep doing that. But it was definitely like very nerve-wracking.
Isn't that incredible? She's the only person I can think of in existence where you could have a following of hundreds of thousands of people, but as soon as that one person, as soon as Oprah follows you, you're performing for an audience of one.
Yeah, and you're
point.
like just a little mute kid again. Like, what? Like, to me, I was just like in the corner by myself as a kid, just staring at stuff, and that's how I felt. Like, what do I do? And the other thing is, honestly, what could anyone say that she hasn't heard before? And that's the other thing I realized is it's like, just be you.
But don't you want to be the person to say something Oprah hasn't heard
but
before?
I think if you try to be that person, you won't be.
It's not going to happen, yeah.
Yeah, because like she's definitely has a huge radar for authenticity, so yeah.
One of the best ones, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's Oprah.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about your book because I want to get into this in a second, but one last Oprah question. What was it like meeting her when you met her? Well, that must have been a crazy moment. There she is.
I remember the first time she said my name, and I was like, I dissociated. I was like, what? Like, is this real? Like, pinch me? It's a very strange experience because she's everything you ever thought she would be. She's amazing. She's, who you see is who you see, and she's just awesome. And it's this parallel experience of I'm just talking to somebody, and she makes you feel really safe and welcome, and then you flash into, oh my God. And you kind of vacillate between that until it just becomes a conversation. And, ultimately, like, what's amazing about her is she's just her. And I think sometimes with like really like iconically famous people, because I've worked with a lot of those people, sometimes it's like they're almost annoyed by it. Like, I have to deal with it. She knows who she is. She knows her impact on others, and she rolls with it and creates a lot of rapport and safety between people. And I just love that about her. She's actually like an incredible role model in that way, because there aren't a lot of successful people where you're like, yeah, I want your success, but I also want to like who you are as a person as a role model too. And she really is that.
Thank you for indulging my Oprah questions.
Yeah, no worries.
So, second book that you've written, I'm very curious. Everyone who's written a book says it's one of the hardest things they've ever done. Here you are now, you're on number 2. What were the lessons you learned coming out of your first book that you brought with you to this one?
So be careful what you write a book about, because you'll get the lesson, right? So the next book is like how to get everything you want with no lessons, easily, without any lessons or any stress, because like that's what I'd want to write about. Because when you write a book about trauma, you're going to get the lesson, and I had no idea what I was signing myself up for. So it's hard. It's very difficult. And also, the book itself came out of 10 years of coaching people, so it's an evidence-based modality, too. And to share that with the world, because they really care about it, was also very difficult, because in my history, I'm not used to people being there when I reach out. And so that's like my childhood stuff. So putting something out that was meaningful was very scary to do. And it's really rewarding to see, this book has been out for about 1.5 years, and it sells really well to this day. Which is exciting. So it's nice that it's worked.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely worked, and there's countless testimonials of people online singing the praises that. What's that like when you see that, when you get to see it in action? When you want to talk about confirmation, when people are coming back to you, be it at your classes or just online, and saying, this really helped me. What does that feel like for you to read those words and see that and know?
It's amazing to hear that. And the other thing is that I think the difference between me and maybe someone who's operating inside a healthcare system is who I care about, who I'm responsible to, and who I report to are people. people are the focus of our practice, not insurance companies or medical companies, that type of stuff. So when something has utility or purpose or it works, I feel so excited because I think in general the healthcare system needs to be people focused, not profit focused. And so when people are using this in conjunction with therapy, or you get a psychologist or you get a therapist who has all this training, go, dude, this is amazing. Or you get a rehab center call you, go, I think addiction and purpose and trauma are kind of related. And I'm like, I know, right? It's just validating that, like, when you have something that has efficacy or usefulness, the market starts to shift. So similar with like Uber, right? Uber was a different option. They didn't make a better cab. They made a completely different option, and I think that's how disruption starts. So for me, it's like little tea leaves that there's ready. The mental health space is ready for disruption. That's how I see it.
One of the things I was fascinated by with your work and your story and sort of the parallels between everything is faith is a big part of your journey. And you talked to, when you're talking to Oprah, you said you talk to God a lot, and you
the same thing, right?
Oprah and God, they're kind of neck and neck in my book. Yeah, it's hard to distinguish the difference.
It's a trinity, right?
But still, you've made no secret of that, and you've talked about that. The faith is a big part for you and a big part of your journey. And I'm curious, when you're writing these books, do you try to write them in such a way as to talk openly about the role faith has played, but maybe not alienate people whose faith doesn't align with yours? Do you try to give advice that everyone can appreciate and understand and employ?
Yeah. Well, so if you look at just peer-reviewed research, like the hardcore science, purpose in life or a connection to something larger than yourself is beyond verified to have life extension, to help heal trauma, help you be more financially abundant, like all the stuff we all want is directly correlated to purpose in life. And so in this book, one of the things I talk about is a higher power can be the ocean. It can be a relationship. It can be your kid. It can be your cat. Like, it doesn't have to be God or some entity. It could be a sunset, because that is a higher power. If anyone's ever been surfing knows that a wave will crush you. It's a higher power too, right? So as long as you have a connection to something larger than yourself and you can able to get outside of yourself, that's really what I was really clear about in this book to highlight, because, in 12-step, when I was in 12-step, it was a higher power of your own understanding, and I've really held on to that. But I think most people can on board with the sense that belonging to something larger than themselves, even if it's the Macy's Day Parade, right, is more inspiring than being all by yourself. And so I think the evidence is there on that. But I don't try to push my beliefs on anybody. That's not my thing.
No, not at all. And that's the thing. I don't think anything I've read of yours has never seemed preachy or like you were doing that. And I was curious about how you found that balance in the work and how you maintained that.
Well, I think there's a difference between who I hold myself to be and what I personally believe, and the work as a scientist, which is what works. And I can separate my personal beliefs from what I would put forward that would be, with like people in mind, right? Because I have more of a Christian upbringing, but the process can work for agnostics, atheists, people who are in any of the Abrahamic traditions or a Buddhist or whatever. And so my goal is to touch human beings, not to make you believe what I believe, because that's not my point. My point is I want to help you.
You have there's a foreword in the book from Dave, for the CEO of Bulletproof.
Yeah.
He was on here before. That dude's a trip.
Love
that guy.
Yeah.
He has done things I couldn't even fathom or imagine. We were talking about all the latest therapies and experiments that he was doing and whatnot. How did you come in contact with Dave? How did you guys meet up?
I met Dave through our mutual friend Michael, and Michael is an amazing soul. He's a company called Consumer Health Summit, where he brings all these health folks together. And there was like all these doctors, and then me in this group, and then Dave. And I just met Dave, and we just connected. And he's somebody who is very well known, very well respected, very successful, and still extremely grounded. And I resonate a lot with people like that. And so what happened was, actually, I didn't have a foreword for the book, and we had a week to write it. And nobody writes a foreword in a week. Nobody. And I called Michael, and I said, do you think we could see if Dave would do it? Dave read the book and turned around a foreword in a day because of his biohacking AI assist, whatever he's doing, mitochondria upregulation thing. But he turned around a foreword in a day, and I couldn't believe it. And to this day, it's like, dude, like, your biohacking clearly works, because nobody reads a book and writes an eloquent foreword in like 24 hours or less.
Yeah, he clearly had a full intimate knowledge of what is in that book and what you're about to, like, the journey you're going to go on as a reader.
Yes.
And he had like a whole point of view on it, and that's one day he turned it all around.
And that's a true story too. So,
that's wild.
Yeah, Dave's amazing.
Yeah, he's got such a great energy about him, man. When he was here,
he's legit. Yeah,
he's the real deal.
He also gave me permission to drink butter again, or I guess for the
nice.
first time, because butter in the coffee is always nice.
Yeah, It's always good to get the thumbs up on that. We're going to take some questions from the audience, but I want to remind the world that Claim Your Power. It's available right now, and it's a fantastic collection of all the stuff that the knowledge you've acquired and the wisdom and the
Thank
40
you so
steps,
much.
man.
This
For
is,
sure.
by the way, the tallest version of the
Is
cover
it?
I've seen, so I want to take a picture by it later. I
Nice.
think it's
We're
maybe taller
definitely going to
than me.
do that.
That's cool.
We're going to take those questions real quick. One last thing. You've also got your podcast going right now as well, which is pretty exciting. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that and just like.
Well, I have done so much research. I'm sort of like, if we're just talking about Dave, right? So the way that Dave approaches sort of health and wellness is how I approach mental health. So he and I are very similar in that context. I have so much information about all the science, how to apply it, and I share it at a lot of our events, and I have no way to just share that all the time. So we decided to take all that stuff and throw it on the podcast. And so it's basically just like this wealth of knowledge. You can get to it on Spotify or Apple or whatever. But it's a lot of the data, a lot of the research you hear from stories from clients, because sometimes people learn best through other people's testimony and evidence and case studies and stuff. But yeah, that's what the podcast is about. And it's starting to pick up steam, actually. It's getting like about 50 or 60,000 downloads a month, which is awesome for like that type of a topic,
Well, it's perfect. You've got like there's some extended cuts and like deep interviews and stuff. And then there's also like great little bite-sized like 15-minute bit pieces that you could throw on while you're commuting and whatnot. So it's a really cool way to just kind of be mindful and pick up some new
Just don't listen to me at anything more than a 1x speed, because I already talk fast enough, Yeah. Don't. Yeah, you probably won't be able to sound like Bugs Bunny or something.
Well, thanks so much, man. We're gonna get some questions now from the room, but you got a lot of cool stuff going on. It's really cool having you here, and I appreciate the chance to pick your brain a little bit.
Awesome.
All right, first question. You got a microphone. Let's find you. Where are you at? There you are. Go for it.
Hello.
Yeah, how you doing?
What's your name?
My name is Khalik.
Khalik, nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
How are you?
I really, I like your brand. Like, your brand is incredible.
Oh, thanks, man.
And as far as
That's the first, actually.
It is.
Someone ever just led with that. That's cool.
I could relate to it. But the host pretty much asked the question, so I'm gonna ask the same question. With like a B section. How? What's the word I'm looking for? Okay, what did it take for you to prepare yourself to write this second book? And out of both of your books, what is the most difficult? Like, which one was the most difficult to write?
Oh, yeah. This was hard. It bothers me when people are like, I read it in a couple hours. I'm like, do you have any idea how hard this was? The way that I write books is I have an idea for something, like maybe a trauma protocol or a diet or whatever, and I'll work with people one-on-one in a coaching capacity. Then I'll go into a group program. Then I'll maybe do an online course and a live event or a retreat and really work the content out. So by the time I write a book, I have a lot of case studies and stuff. So what prepares me is working with people, because it's important that if I put something out into the world that has an evidence-based approach, I know it's actually going to work. So I'm not just sitting in my house like, I'll just write this thing. And the other thing is, whenever you have knowledge about something, you have what's called the curse of knowledge, so you don't know how to teach it to beginners. So one of the reasons why I love working with people is they ask questions I would never assume to teach on, because I have the curse of knowledge. I know too much, essentially, for my topic. So it helps me understand how to write something where people can read it who are a beginner, and also really create a process that actually works, that's effective, and not something that just puts people on a wild goose chase. But this specific book was really difficult because it was all about emotional trauma, and I had to face all mine, and I didn't know I had as much as I did. So that was very difficult. So yeah, the only warning is if you write a book, just get ready for the lesson, and that's not to scare you, but just so you can walk into it eyes wide open.
Thank you for your question. We're going to do one more real quick follow-up. Ultimately, going through that experience, how is that fed back into the other work that you do and influence the talks that you give and the classes that you hold coming out of this book? That has to change a little bit of your perspective.
I think the unintentional consequence was differentiation, meaning like I figured out what makes me different, because people would always compare me to, like, I don't know, Lewis Howes or Tony Robbins or Brendan Burchard or these different people, and those are all amazing folks and friends of mine, but it always kind of bothered me. And now it's like, oh, here's how I fit, which was actually the unintended consequence. So it's nice to know like what I do, because now I know even what I do. And it's also able to say like, hey, like this is actually how it would be different than Lewis or different than Tony. It's a very unique approach, and that's been a very fun thing to figure out, but it wasn't intentional.
Like very much finding your purpose, like
literally,
like rediscovering your purpose,
literally
like narrowing it down. Yeah, very cool.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
There we go. That's how you knew the book worked. There you are.
Yeah,
I got to put it.
It worked on me.
Exactly. I got time for one more question. Let's do one more. Microphone, come on down.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, because you give so many advice to so many people, when you were going through a difficult time, what was the best advice you got from someone else?
By the way, what's your name?
Zara.
Nice to meet you, Zara. I think I think when we go through hard times, it's the one time when we don't want to reach out and ask for help. And I think the most important thing is to realize that when you're in a downtime, it's our tendency to kind of withhold, withdraw, kind of like a turtle, put our head back in the shell, put the covers over our heads and kind of isolate. And the constant reminder that you need support the most when you want to push it away the most, and to work my best to let people know what's going on with me. Because, you know, I've lost a lot of friends to suicide and stuff like that, and I had no idea they needed something. And so I think the idea that to reach out and let people you know who care about you know what's going on with you is the most important thing that you can do. And to not isolate, because isolation is where all the bad stuff festers, right? Like addiction and procrastination and all kinds of bad stuff happens in isolation. So to get into an environment that's a little healthier is super important too. So yeah, reaching out and asking for help when you don't want to has been very hard for me, but it's when it's been the most important thing is to lean in support when I don't want to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Thank you, everybody, for being such a great audience. You guys are awesome.
Yeah,
Appreciate you hanging out with us. Thanks to those who tuned in at home. I will remind the world once more, Claim Your Power is available now where books are sold. You can also check out the podcast on iTunes and where else? I mean,
Spotify, Stitcher, all of them.
Wherever podcasts.
Yeah.
Wherever books are, you're going to find the book. Wherever podcasts are, you're going to find the podcast. Is there anything else that
I
we
would
want
just
to tell
say
people
that,
about?
you know, a lot of people buy books and it's called shelf help. They just put it on the shelf and they don't actually do it, right?
Yeah, I've heard that.
So if you go to claimyourpowerbook.com, there's actually a free video coaching to accompany the book to actually make you get it done. And even if you don't read it, the coaching will help you implement. And the most important thing I care about is people actually getting a result. So you can have free coaching if you want, if you go to claimyourpowerbook.com. Yeah.
The reviews speak for themselves, man. People are out there claiming their power every day. Why can't you be one of them? Go ahead and pick the book up, follow the courses. Mastin, thanks again so much, man,
dude,
for
thanks
hanging
for
out
having
with
me,
us.
man.
Everybody
Awesome.
make a round of applause right here for the
Hey.
great Mastin Kipp. Woo!